Okay, my colleagues, let's start immediately. Next point of the agenda: the situation in Ethiopia. The exchange of views on the situation in Ethiopia. We hold this exchange of views jointly with the Committee on Development. So welcome my colleagues and friends of the Friendly Committee. I would like to give a warm welcome also to our four guest speakers. Madam Hirut Zemene, the Ambassador of Ethiopia, Madam Rita Larangina, Managing Director for Africa at the European External Action Service, Madam Sandra Kramer, Director for Africa at the GD INTPA, and Madam Andrea Kolaimach, Director for Sub-Saharan Africa at the DG ECHO. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name slightly differently. Today we are following up on our exchange of views, which we held in November at the beginning of the conflict between Ethiopia's government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The security situation in Tigray remains extremely concerning. Thousands have died, sporadic fighting continues, and the mobile network and access to internet remain cut off, except in some areas. The humanitarian situation is dire. According to the UN, around 2.3 million people, that is more than half of the Tigray population, are in urgent need for humanitarian assistance. We receive reports of ethnic targeted violence, killings, massive looting, rapes, and forceful returns of refugees. Moreover, the conflict is affecting more and more the whole region. Eritrean troops are involved in the military operations in Tigray, and the escalating tensions between Sudan and Ethiopia are also extremely worrying. Therefore, I repeat my call on the federal and regional governments in Ethiopia, as well as all of its neighbors, to abstain from further military deployment or threats and to engage in a sincere, peaceful and inclusive dialogue. The situation calls for the immediate action to ensure that it does not lead to further destabilization of Ethiopia and the wider region, a region which is also of the utmost importance for us in the European Union. Now let me pass the microphone to Mr. Thomas Stobe, Chair of the Committee on Development. Please, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to have this important topic together between our committees. Some 15 months ago, a DEVE committee delegation that I led had the opportunity to get insights into developments in Ethiopia through meetings with ministers, parliamentarians, and various other stakeholders, as well as we did field visits. We saw a country that had embarked on a new and promising path. However, strong tensions, and in particular, a very deadly outburst of violence just a pair of weeks before our arrival, were powerful reminders that the promising path also was linked to serious problems and risks. Today, the political and economic reform process appears to be in great danger. Our wish for it to succeed has not diminished. We wish Ethiopia to come out of the crisis it is now experiencing as united as possible in pursuing continuing development. We wish your country to be a shining example of development success. It is now obviously urgent to tend to humanitarian needs in Tigray and to stabilize the situation there. It is urgent to help Tigrayans as well as Eritrean refugees who lived there before the large-scale violence to live in Tigray. Either this means refraining from leaving Tigray or returning from Sudan. The absence of agreement between the EU and Ethiopia on humanitarian access to Tigray is deeply worrying. I very much welcome the opportunity we now have to listen to the Ethiopian government's views on the situation, and in particular on how the blockage in our bilateral relation caused by the humanitarian access issue can be overcome. So, Mrs. Ambassador, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this joint meeting of our two committees, and then I'll give the floor back to the AFET Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tobel. Now, without further ado, let me invite Madam Ambassador of Ethiopia, Madam Hirut Zemene, to take the floor. Madam Ambassador, can you speak for us for 5 minutes, please?
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see you, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable David McAllister, now I see it's Honorable Mr. Wiskwaski, if I have pronounced it right, Vice Chair of the AFET Committee, Honorable Thomas Tobey, Chair of the Development Committee, Honorable members of the Joint Committees, Excellencies, representatives of the EU Commission. I'd like to thank the Joint Committees for arranging this opportunity for me to address this august body in presenting my country's position regarding the latest developments in Ethiopia and to exchange views on the matter. My address will focus mainly on the recent law and order ascertaining operation, and by doing so, I will also touch upon the ongoing important national reform processes. Ethiopia's reform agenda. As many members of the Development Committee who have taken a visit to Ethiopia last year have witnessed, my country has been undertaking transformative political economic reform programs in the past 2.5 years. It's to be recalled, this reform was launched by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who came to the helm, elected by a large majority of the then ruling party, the EPRDF, which included the TPLF. These political and economic reform initiatives have entailed, among others, addressing the gross violation of human and political rights that were rampant in the past. On the political arena, thousands of political prisoners and journalists were freed, and previously banned political parties have been welcomed to engage in the peaceful struggle. On the economic sphere, a clear reform plan was launched to address challenges faced with mass youth unemployment and macroeconomic imbalances. Normalization of relations with Eritrea was, of course, an important step, and at the time, UN Secretary General Guterres have noted it has a wind of peace in the Horn of Africa. It brought a wind of peace. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 for, among others, this important act of creating peace and stability in the region. On resistance to reform, especially from the TPLF's illegal activities. These reform initiatives, however, were not free from challenges coming from some anti-reform elements. Among the forces which were hell-bent on derailing our reform programs was the TPLF. Even though the government tried its best to take on board the TPLF leadership, the party was blinded by its monopoly of power close to 3 decades and was unwilling to be part of the dialogue that is ongoing with other political groupings. When the Ethiopian parliament decided to postpone national elections due to the COVID pandemic, the TPLF rejected this and went on to conduct its own sham elections, an act that was unconstitutional. As if this was not enough, the TPLF attacked the northern command of the Ethiopian National Defense Force on the 3rd of November 2020. Honorable chairs, distinguished members of the Joint Committee, I would like to take you now to the law enforcement operation. Prime Minister Abiy was the last person that would have ordered a military operation while he was trying to build a culture of dialogue. I would like to ask this august body to look into the number of reconciliation efforts he tried, including through the involvement of local elderly, religious and prominent people to take on board the TPLF. No government would sit idly by when an attack is committed on its national defense force, and unfortunately from within. The government had no other option but to engage in a law and order ascertaining operation after this red line was crossed. The operation from the beginning had a clear, achievable goals. These were restoring the law and order situation, bring the perpetrators to justice, and restore legitimate interim government in Tigray until election takes place. The operation, as you might be aware, has been concluded within 3 weeks. Regarding, ladies and gentlemen, regarding the post-operation period, the government is focused on the following key priorities: delivering much anticipated humanitarian assistance, bringing the perpetrators before the law, investigating atrocities, reassuring the community, and the reconstruction of damaged infrastructure. The humanitarian situation that currently exists in Tigray is an utmost priority to my government. We are also looking into a dignified voluntary repatriation of our citizens that have fled to the Sudan because of the propaganda of the perpetrators. Prior to the operation, there were already 1.8 million people in the region that would need humanitarian assistance. This figure was increased to around 2.5 million people. The government has now mobilized enough resources to support these people in urgent need. As we speak, stock of more than 300,000
Madam Ambassador, there is a disconnection, so let me pass the floor right now to other colleagues from the European institutions, and we will reconnect with you later on, so we'll give you the chance also to respond to some issues raised by our colleagues, by MEPs. So let me give the floor to Madam Rita Larangina, Managing Director for Africa at the European External Action Service. Madam, could you limit your presentation to 5 minutes, please?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can see, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, members of Parliament, dear Ambassador. Ethiopia is a long-standing partner in the Horn of Africa and one of the few countries with whom the European Union has a strategic engagement. As a committed and reliable partner of Ethiopia, the EU attaches great importance to the stability and unity of the country, which is also crucial for the Horn of Africa as a whole. In that regard, the EU has always shared its strong and frank concerns about the current situation in Tigray and conveyed our support to the people of Ethiopia for the loss of many lives. We take note of the elements presented by Her Excellency the Ambassador, and I would like to thank her for the information on measures taken by the government of Ethiopia. Nevertheless, the situation on the ground remains of grave concern. That is why we have been insisting with the Ethiopian government on two immediate priorities: silencing the guns and obtaining full humanitarian access to Tigray with a view to stop atrocities and the unfolding humanitarian disaster. The dire humanitarian situation must be tackled most urgently, starting with unimpeded, unconditional, safe and immediate access for humanitarian actors. In a region where needs were already high, the situation is dramatically worsening. My colleague from ECHO, Andrea Kulaima Gabriel, will elaborate further on this point. The EU is concerned by allegations of human rights violations and ethnic targeting in Tigray and other regions. That concern has been clearly expressed in the declaration of the HRVP issued on 25th December. Ongoing reports of non-Ethiopian involvement in Tigray raised additional worries. It is imperative that human rights principles are respected. Abuses, where they have occurred, must be investigated and those responsible held accountable. The EU is also deeply concerned about the current security situation in Tigray and reports of fighting therein. Today, it is still very dangerous for humanitarian workers as well as for local journalists to operate in the region. The EU recalls the urgent need to protect civilians and to fully open access to this region, also for media and communication. The EU is concerned for the risks to the integrity of the country and the stability of the wider region. We are following with great concern the situation along the Sudanese-Ethiopian border. These tensions seem to be part of a broader deterioration of relations between Sudan and Ethiopia, but they also illustrate to what extent the instability in Ethiopia is affecting regional peace. As you are aware, yesterday at the Foreign Affairs Council, the HRVP and foreign ministers analyzed the situation in the Horn of Africa, in Ethiopia, and also along the Sudanese Ethiopian border. The Council agreed on the urgent need to prevent further destabilization and to put more political pressure in order to settle the dispute through diplomatic and peaceful means. Following the discussions held, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Mr. Pekka Haavisto, will travel as an envoy of the European Union in the region. His mission should take place in the next weeks. Mr. Haavisto will be accompanied by the EU Special Representative on the Horn of Africa, Mr. Alexander Hondos. Mr. Co-Chairs, Members of Parliament, Ethiopia is in transition. Important political and economic reforms were initiated by Prime Minister Abiy. We consider that an enhanced political dialogue on the future of the federal system and the appropriate preparation of elections planned for June the 5th are essential to create a common view within the country regarding its future. The EU is committed to the preservation of Ethiopia's unity, territorial integrity, and the full respect of its constitution, and is willing to support these efforts. In this regard, the EU will remain in close contact with the Ethiopian authorities at all levels, namely following the last exchange between the HRVP and Ethiopian Deputy Prime Minister Mekonnen on the 9th of January. We will also continue to reach out to partners in the region and beyond, in particular IGAD and the African Union. If you allow me one last word to recall that the EU has a number of citizens in the affected area. We have been engaging with all sides to ensure their safety. I leave the floor to my colleague Sandra Kramer for further elements on development aspects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Director. And let me pass the floor to Madam Sandra Kramer, Director for Africa at DG INTPA, ex-DEFCO. Could you limit the presentation to 3 minutes, please?
Yes, dear chairs, dear members of parliament, I am Sandra Kramer and this is DG INTPA, International Partnerships. That's what it stands for. I'm very delighted to speak to you today, very much in line with what my colleague from the External Action Service, Rita, has just said. Ethiopia is an important EU partner in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is also one of the few countries with whom the EU has a strategic engagement. And because of this close relationship, the EU is following the current situation in northern Ethiopia with great attention. What is happening today in Tigray remains a source of concerns for the European Union. Along with the High Representative, we continue calling for actions to focus on reducing tensions. Engagement and dialogue remain the only alternatives. In view of these concerns, the EU decided in December 2020 to postpone the disbursement of 3 budget support payments potentially due by the end of 2020 for a total amount of 88.5 million. The EU took this decision to create adequate political space to assess the current situation, and in particular with regards to immediate, unconditional, unrestricted and unimpeded humanitarian access to all areas in Tigray to respond to the dramatic humanitarian situation. The EU did not suspend its cooperation with Ethiopia. The country remains the recipient of the largest national indicative program under the 11th European Development Fund. Besides, programs financed under the EU Trust Fund for Africa continue to be implemented normally. The EU continues implementing programs in support of the population, such as addressing social determinants of health for gender equality with an EU contribution of 25 million, as well as of vulnerable groups through programs such as decentralization of disaster risk management in Ethiopia, with a contribution of 33.5 million. We have recently initiated the programming of the Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument for the years 2021 to 2027. Then we call upon all of us to reflect on the relationship we want to have with Ethiopia. This reflection will inform the future partnership with Ethiopia, which will be based on our priorities as defined by President von der Leyen, such as Green Deal, inclusive economic growth, digital transformation, or migration, among others, but also on the core values that we share in the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Director. Let me pass the floor to another director, Madam Andrea Kulaimach, Director for Sub-Saharan Africa at DG ECO. I also ask you to limit your presentation to 3 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much, chairs of the two committees. Dear Ambassador, dear colleagues, the Tigray crisis comes on top of an important humanitarian situation in Ethiopia, as Ethiopia was already facing 3 severe sets of humanitarian needs. The presence of refugee, almost 800,000, which Ethiopia has welcomed and has hosted, including 100,000 Eritrean refugees in Tigray. There is an internal displacement crisis as a result of internal interethnic tensions, and there's also a food insecurity crisis with close to 13 million food insecure people. Zooming onto the situation in Tigray, as the ambassador herself indicated, there was, prior to the current crisis, already a significant humanitarian response benefiting at least 1.8 million people in Tigray. And that has been brought to a halt with the start of the conflict. It isn't difficult to picture what the civilian population is going through after 2.5 months without humanitarian aid or without cash for those who would normally fend for themselves, with disrupted basic services, and with the conflict raging that has killed many, amongst whom several aid workers, and that has witnessed serious human rights and IHL, international humanitarian law violation, including sexual and gender-based violence. The more time passes by without adequately addressing the humanitarian needs of the population, the more critical their condition will become from a nutritional, health and protection point of view. Since the start of the conflict, following Commissioner Lenarchic's mission to Sudan and Ethiopia beginning of December, the European Union has engaged with other donors and stakeholders in calling for respect of IHL and for unimpeded humanitarian access. In practical terms, what does it mean? Unimpeded access means that the humanitarian organization must be allowed to operate in all the affected areas, that they must be able to conduct their needs assessment, organize the provision of aid and monitor it, and that they must do that in an independent manner. And that requires not only being able to access the Tigray region, but it means being able to have a sustained presence at field level with expatriate personnel. So concretely, the asks that we have are pretty basic. Regarding access, to guarantee rapid passage of humanitarian teams and delivery, to transform the current clearance system, which is cumbersome and not efficient, into a notification system. It is about protection of civilians in terms of guaranteeing that those who want to move out of Tigray, out of their places of origin into other Ethiopian regions or in neighboring countries such as Sudan are able to do that. Regarding refugees, it means not engaging into acts of coerced return of Eritrean refugees, which is something that seems to have already happened. To conclude, it has been 2.5 months since the start of the conflict. The EU has consistently called for respect of IHL and international refugee law, for the protection of civilians and refugees, and for unfettered humanitarian access. So far, there have been tiny steps in terms of access to Tigray, which we acknowledge, but these steps bear no measure to what is needed to provide a basic minimal assistance to the affected populations and to avert a major catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Director. Before I pass the floor to my colleague, Chair of the Committee on Development, I would like to ask if Madam Ambassador is reconnected with us, and if there is so, Madam Ambassador, can I ask you to conclude your presentation in 3 minutes? You will have a chance to respond to the problems raised by our colleagues at the end of the meeting, but now please conclude your first introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be happy if I could do it in 4 minutes, and I don't know whether my previous presentation will link up very well because I was interrupted, and apologies about that if it were on our side.
Please go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. So I was talking about the humanitarian situation. I will repeat the last sentence. Prior to the operation, there were already 1.8 million people in the region that would need humanitarian assistance. This figure has increased to around 2.5 million people. The government has now mobilized enough resources to support these people in urgent need. As we speak, a stock of more than 300,000 quintals of food and much needed medical items are being distributed from 92 food distribution centers. The assistance gives priority to children, the elderly, and women. Where necessary, air transport is also applied to distribute the aid. Through the MOU signed with the UN Resident Coordinator, humanitarian access is provided and is being delivered through the government of Ethiopia and, among others, ICRC, World Food Programme, MSF, CRS, and Save the Children are on the ground. Regarding bringing the perpetrators to justice, at this stage, several members of the senior political and military leadership of the TPLF have been apprehended. They have now been brought to trial for due process of law. Investigation of atrocities committed. The Federal Attorney General and the Federal Police Commission are investigating the various heinous crimes and atrocities committed in Tigray, among which the investigation of the massacre at the place called Maikadra is completed. This will help hold the perpetrators accountable. And with regards to reinstating government structures, the TPLF clique has damaged several infrastructure as it fled to the mountains. The government is now working to rebuild damaged infrastructure and restore public service. The peace and security situation in Tigray has shown steady improvement, and public service has resumed. Important work has been done to restore power supply, telecom, and banking services, which had been destroyed by the selfish act of the perpetrators and still being done in some of the areas. Sustaining the reform at country level, the government is now fully focused on sustaining and spearheading the reform programs. One of the immediate tasks of the government will be conducting regional and national elections, which are slated for early June 2021. The EU will observe this election. Honorable chairs, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, as a founding member of the League of Nations and its successor, the United Nations, and as an ancient and independent state, Ethiopia remains to be a responsible nation that upholds its domestic as well as international obligations. Ethiopia is committed to create a democratic and prosperous future for all its people. Ethiopia has also been and will continue to be the beacon of stability in the Horn of Africa, a leading troop contributing country to the United Nations peacekeeping operations, and a host to close to 1 million refugees. Hence, we urge our partners to look things in the right context and perspective, and not to be taken by transient challenges here and there. We also call upon the EU, a strategic partner, as has been mentioned, to remain committed to the partnership we built over the years. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now I can pass the floor to my colleague, Mr. Tobet, to chair the discussion of Europarlamentarians, please, sir.
Yes. Thank you to all the speakers and to Mrs. Ambassador. We'll now open up the floors for the political groups. I would say, in general, try to limit yourself to 2 minutes. We will then, of course, give the floor back to our speakers and to the ambassador. And I will start now by giving the floor to the chair of the delegation to the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, to Carlos Sorinho. Please, Carlos, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I should like to thank to all of the speakers. Rita Laringino, to begin, we would like to thank you also for the work that you're carrying out, and also Joseph Borrell's work on behalf of Europe and the importance of its efforts with regional organizations. And to thank the ambassador. As the co-president of the ACP EU JPA, I'd like to share with you our views.
Ao governo federal etíope, aos meios de comunicação.
The humanitarian organizations, as well as human rights defenders, we would like to have a free and full access to the Tigray region. They could also have access to all of the assistance that they need so badly. It is clear that human rights law has to be applied on both sides, and any military operations in that area and any crimes need to be investigated independently and impartially. Military force must be carried out under specific conditions and make sure that there are no abuses. We also the federal government, Ethiopia has made great strides in the recent decades, but it mustn't leave that to be lost. The federal government must continue to carry out these efforts in 2021. Considering these circumstances, the EU must make sure that the humanitarian assistance is carried out as in line with the provisions in the EU, to make sure that although those that need that assistance may receive it. Madam Ambassador, what you denied, we can see the facts actually decry, and we have to make sure that the government is well aware of all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll give the floor to Isabelle Wiesler-Lima, EPP.
Thank you, Chair. I also, je vais continuer en français. Je voudrais aussi remercier Madame l'ambassadeur.
To thank the ambassador for her presentation this afternoon. And I'd also like to thank the EES for their presentation. What I'm concerned about is the various views that were raised. It doesn't seem that we have two identical visions of the situation. And I'd also like to underscore mainly that, Madam Ambassador, what you present as a situation that is has been taken care of, I think that's the thing, well, that makes me the most worried. By taking note of the fact that there is a famine, that there is a humanitarian situation that is very challenging, that there are violations of human rights, that would mean that we could then act. Do you think that there would be any possibility in the near future to make sure that NGOs will have access to the Tigray region? And when will communication be restored in Mekelle? Moreover, I'd like to put a question to the EAS and state that the situation as it is, this escalation, is worrisome to us for the region as a whole. I'd like to see if that would have an impact on our cooperation in Pan-African relations. And how do you conceive of our bilateral relations within that context? But thank you to one and all. And first and foremost, I hope that we will be able to work together such that we can improve the situation in Ethiopia and specifically in the Tigray region. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria Arena, S&D.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the different speakers, and thank you, Madam Ambassador, for the information you gave us. You said that the electoral process, or the postponement, rather, of the elections was one of the triggers for the conflict in Tigray, and the way in which the TPLF reacted to the announcement of the postponement of the elections. We know that before the problems in Tigray, we already know that there were 1 million refugees and 1.8 million internally displaced people because the stability of Ethiopia is very fragile. Given what triggered these conflicts in Tigray, and given that the reason was the postponement of the elections, I think that the answer from Ethiopia should be how can it organize a peaceful election given the situation it's in at the moment. So I think that is the first question. If we want to work towards a future stability of Ethiopia. And the second point, and I agree with my colleagues, is the humanitarian situation. There are millions of people living in tragic conditions of famine. How can we resolve the humanitarian question? And the third question is transparent justice and access for the NGOs to these regions. And this is a question I have for the ambassador. How can you respond to these three essential principles? Ethiopia is an important partner of the EU. We've always worked together. We've done some remarkable work over the last few years, and we want to continue to work together. But these three principles must be adopted, and we must get answers to those three questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I got an updated speaker list, and it's actually longer than I thought, so I really need to be strict. And what I'm understood, we're all gotten the notice that we should do our intervention in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Every political group has been informed of that, and now also I as chair. Perfect. We go on then. I will actually give the floor to George Hölveni from EPP.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Ambassador, the colleagues. Yeah, first of all, I am really a friend of Ethiopia. And this reason I visited 2 years ago. You know, it's not only Abyss, but really the army, the refugee camp, and that was the place for security for refugee from Eritrea. But and I try to follow the issue on daily basis and I have really chain of concerns, and for this reason I really welcome to or exchanges of view for the External Action Service. On the 19th November 2020 we could have a discussion in the presence of the representative of Ethiopia, and to be sure, Madam Ambassador, really the governmental steps are taken rebelling groups threatening the security can be understood easily, but the current actions are going too far in the point of my view. And what is really the exact aim of the government of this? And the latest report received from the UNHCR states that they are still unable to access the Hichas and Shelba camps since 4th of November 2020. Is true or not true? 56,000 Ethiopian refugees has fled the country, and 222,000 people have been internally displaced according to UN data. And really also the humanitarian workers have a limited access. And my concrete question, final questions, Madam Ambassador, how does the Ethiopian central government evaluate the possibility of the humanitarian corridor? My colleagues already mentioned the importance of this. Many thanks.
Thank you, Jan-Christoph Ochen, Renew. Not connected. Then we move on to Dominic Bild, ID.
Mr. Bild, please press the speak button. Thank you.
Oui.
Oui.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Madame l'Ambassadeur.
Thank you, Chairman, Ambassador. The tragic situation in Tigray has overshadowed another crisis, which is on the Renaissance Dam. The negotiations in the African Union have not been brought to a successful conclusion. The irrigation minister says that this is due to Ethiopian intransigence. The United States, unlike the EU, have not hesitated to suspend $130 million of aid for Ethiopia in 2020 because of the lack of progress in the talks. I would like to know if the Commission has planned any similar measures apart from those already taken because of the situation in Tigray. Madam Ambassador, how do you see the consequences of this block in the discussions on regional stability, given that this dam is a vital resource for Egypt, and this is added to the conflicts on the border in the Al-Fashka region? Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Langensiepen, Greens. Langensiepen, Greens.
Yes, now. Frau Botschafterin, Herr
Some connection problems. Try again. Yes.
So, ich spreche mal.
Please press the speak button only once.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay.
It's okay.
The European Parliament last year in November described the situation in Ethiopia, placing it on the agenda. We discussed the humanitarian question and the war, the catastrophic humanitarian situation and the countless refugees, and we called for an immediate ceasefire. We've made available 90 million euros, which has been frozen now. EU aid has been frozen, and in the middle of January, the former minister Yun Misin was found dead. Or he was killed in unexplained circumstances. Is there a long-term or even medium-term strategy of the Ethiopian government aiming at the end of this war? Eritrean and Somalian stakeholders are involved in the war as well. What can you say about the death of the foreign minister? How do you assess the stability of the country? And of course, bearing in mind tension with other ethnic groups, does the president have any control over the situation? And now a brief question on the refugee situation. What measures has the Ethiopian government taken, or does it intend to take, to resolve the question of the refugees in the camps in Tigray and Sudan? How are you going to support them? What can we do as MEPs, and what can the Commission do? Thank you.
Thank you. Then I think we go back to Jan Christoph Ochen, Renew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for enabling the possibility to take the floor. First of all, I hear on the one hand DG DevCo doing, let's say, business as usual, so continuing to engage with the Ethiopian authorities, and on the other hand, I hear DG ECHO that says that all the asks for access for humanitarian organizations to the Tigray region are not put in place, that there are only tiny steps, as you said, Andrea. And for me, this is very concerning. Mrs. Ambassador, I really urge the Ethiopian authorities to give access to humanitarian organizations. These people need to go onto the ground and to see what is happening. If there is nothing to hide, you give access to those people. Please make sure that communication is restored. Please make sure that that justice is taken in an independent way. I think these asks from the European Union are not asks that are where you are unable to fulfill those. But if you see the European Union as a partner for Ethiopia, please cooperate in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline Rose, Greens.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Madame l'Ambassadeur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Ambassador. I won't go over everything that was said. I just wanted to talk about 23.7 million euros extra aid, including Sudan and Kenya. We've talked about the restricted access for NGOs. What can be done to gain access for these organizations? And then we've heard about power cuts and the breakdown of water supplies, problems on the roads. When are these problems going to be resolved? We've got famine in Tigray, we've got an emergency. We have to meet the people's urgent needs in food aid. And there is also a conflict, but there are existing crises, such as the locust swarms, which I mentioned in the Development Committee. What are the commitments of the Ethiopian government, and how can we ensure that humanitarian aid will reach the people who need it? And on the 21st of January, the Union heard about the increase in sexual violence. What can be done about that? What action can be taken by the EEAS to fight against that scourge? Thank you.
Thank you. Asita Kanko, ISAR.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to first of all say that I feel quite shocked when I heard the Ethiopian government quite denying the situation there, although they are not letting humanitarian aid in. The people of the Tigray region face fear and famine as we speak right now. The killings and arrests have caused disarray, and the effect on the civilian population and Eritrean refugees hosted in this region is a humanitarian crisis. There have been some positive developments only from our side. The EU has cut some of its financial assistance to Ethiopia, and there have been attempts to increase food aid distribution and to restart the water supply and limited health services. But it is a situation at a tipping point. Our engagement with Ethiopia is perhaps indicative of our broader engagement with Africa. Every week, whether it be Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan, the DRC, the Sahel, regions within Africa are backsliding from the democratic and economic progress that has been made in recent years. It's a tragedy to watch. It is our responsibility as part of a broader alliance of democratic nations to seek to promote democracy, peace and stability around the world. This Commission and Council has talked a big game on a renewed partnership with Africa, but I cannot see any real strategy. Since President Juncker left office, Africa has gone from a clear priority to the EU simply going through the motions. We may now practically have a commissioner for Africa, but we don't have a plan to go with it, and words are not enough. My question is therefore very simple. When are we going to start taking seriously our engagement with this important strategic continent and close neighbor? And what is your real plan for the escalation for the situation in Ethiopia in the coming weeks and months? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Mick Wallace, the left.
Thank you very much. Sorry I was late. I was on another committee, but I was following it on my phone. I'm actually pretty shocked that we're actually pretending that everything is normal. I've been speaking to people on the ground in Ethiopia since November. People that can't find their family members. There's a humanitarian crisis taking place in Ethiopia. The UN says that there's at least 2.3 million people in need of immediate assistance. The UN is not a left-wing group. This is terrible what's happening in Ethiopia. And we know that Abiy Ahmed had meetings with Somalia and Eritrea on numerous occasions before the war started. And so much for restoring order in the place. He's creating havoc. And let's call the truth. Abiy Ahmed is committing war crimes on a daily basis in Ethiopia, and we are pretending that nothing is wrong. What's wrong with us? This is an unelected guy that took office in 2018, clearly with the help of the West, who even organised the Nobel Peace Prize for him. God help us. How long will it take before we react? How long before we actually start speaking the truth about what's really happening in Ethiopia? Do they have to be run out of the place as refugees and looked across the Mediterranean to get to Europe to make a different life before we actually react to it? What's wrong with us? Please, the EU can do better. Please, we've got to start looking at the real truth here. Thanks.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Antoni Comino-Olviers, non-attached.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sí, señora embajadora, yo me sumo a...
Thank you. I would like to support the requests made by most of my colleagues. We've got information that tells us that there are 6 million people who have not sufficient access to food, medicine and water. We're facing the risk of a crisis which could lead to a crisis for hundreds of thousands of people. And I would like to call for the access be given to humanitarian aid, quite apart from the aid that the government is providing that you talked about. There are NGOs who have told us that they can't get in. They cannot get through. They cannot get their supplies to their destination because of the bureaucracy imposed by the Ethiopian government. Secondly, if there have been murders of civilians, because there is indication that there have been murders of civilians and that we need an independent authority to investigate it. We need a UN mission to go and see whether any war crimes have been committed. And finally, we're not dealing with a domestic issue of Ethiopia. We're talking about a crisis which could destabilize the entire Horn of Africa. So please allow the African Union to mediate. This is an area where the African Union could intervene and do some mediation work, because please do not treat it as though it were a domestic internal crisis.
So to Fabio Massimo Castaldo, AFET rapporteur.
Thank you, Chair, and let me welcome once more a standing rapporteur for the Horn of Africa, Her Excellency Ambassador Zemene, here at the European Parliament, and thanks Her Yuponol for the insightful introductory remarks. Having Her Excellency here today is a concrete added value for enhancing our understanding of the situation in the Federal Republic of Ethiopia and the whole Horn of Africa based on the insiders' views. Over the last few weeks, international media reported growing tensions between the Ethiopian and Sudanese authorities in the disputed Alpha Shaga region that resulted in an increased military presence on both sides of the border and in mutual accusations of airspace and territorial violations. Moreover, Ethiopian Army Chief of Staff, General Birhanu Jula, said that a third party was behind the Sudanese army's violation of Ethiopia's sovereignty, without naming it. However, the close ties between Sudan and Egypt, Her Excellency, both fierce opponents of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, make me think about the potential Cairo involvement. In brief, the fear of a spillover effect to the whole region already expressed by this parliament seems to be based on solid ground. In light of that, I would like to ask Her Excellency Zemene whether and to which extent Addis Ababa sees potential African Union's involvement in the diplomatic talks advocated by Ethiopian authorities as positive. Do you believe that these tensions might be solved through dialogue within a regional forum, or bilateral negotiations are the only option considered? And similarly, we know that the Sudanese-Egyptian common position to the GERD was backed by former US President Donald Trump, who also despicably stated that he might have blown up by the dam. Now that the US administration has changed, multilateral dialogue may replace unilateral and muscular postures, thus favoring a tune down between Cairo and Khartoum objection. Do you think it's possible to take advantage of this momentum and relaunch negotiation between all African countries who direct interest in Nile River to agree on the functioning of the JERD and the share of water? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And lastly, I will give the floor to Norbert Neusser, Standing Rapporteur DEWE.
Thank you very much, Chair. Vielen Dank.
Thank you also to all of the speakers. Now, turning now to the ambassador, it's true that Ethiopia is reforming, that there are lots of changes there, and it's true also that you've released political prisoners. That's all true. But the situation in Tigray is far from resolved. Maybe in Mekelle, because the troops there hold power. The number of people in need of assistance and help has grown, and when you say that you're ensuring that humanitarian aid is being transported into the region, I can tell you that it's insufficient. I've been working for a few years with NGOs in the area, and I have contact with native NGOs on the ground in Tigray, and they're telling another story. There is the suspicion that government troops are accepting the hunger of the people, and that they're using this as a weapon against the Tigray Liberation Front. I would like you to tell us where humanitarian assistance is taking place, where it isn't taking place, and if you can do that, we would be able to see improvements in the delivery of human aid. Thank you very much.
We're supposed to be done by 6 o'clock, so I will give you 2 minutes each for the answers, and if you're not sufficient happy with the answers, then we can do it in a written form. So I will start by then giving the floor to the Managing Director, Laranjinya, at EAS.
Laranjinya, please press the speak button. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to start by recalling that Africa has been established as an important priority by this Commission. President of the Commission, van der Leyen, made her first visit to Addis Ababa, and in this way giving a clear sign of the interest and the priority that is given to the African continent. I would also like to recall that the President of the European Council, the HRVP, have been visiting Ethiopia last year and have been engaging with the African Union, and in this way giving a clear sign again of the interest and of the European Union to reinforce its cooperation with the African continent. Regarding specifically the situation in Ethiopia, I agree what has been referred by some members of parliament of the concerns that we have with the impact of the situation in the region, and that is why the visit that is being prepared by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland in representation of the HRVP will also include contacts with the countries in the region in order to see how best we can engage with them and how best we can contribute to a resolution of the situation. To finish, I would just like to mention that, as my colleague Sandra Kramer clearly indicated, we understand that the situation in Ethiopia implies a reflection on the future relationship with this country, and that is why a suspension of budget support has been already decided, and that is why decisions will be taken in the follow-up of this decision and on the future of the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kramer, DJ Intba.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Commission led by President von der Leyen has made Africa a strategic priority. She immediately, I think 4 days after taking office, visited Addis, and we have meanwhile also a communication jointly by the HRPP and the Commissioner for International Partnerships, which was adopted in March 2020, and Council conclusions of June and of October. We're looking forward also, of course, in 2021 to an EU-AU summit. I would like to just say about our engagement with Ethiopia and our cooperation. Ethiopia is an important partner of the EU, and in December, the EU decided to suspend budget support payments for a total amount of 88.5. But at this point in time, the EU is not considering suspending its cooperation with Ethiopia. Any suspension of cooperation with a given country should be triggered by activating Article 96 of the Cotonou Agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Director Kolaina at DJ ECHO.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back to one of the questions that I received regarding the support that has been provided in terms of humanitarian assistance to Ethiopia. So in 2020, we started with a budget of 33 million euros. That was increased in three occasions. The first one in reaction to the locust crisis with 9.5 million. The second one in reaction to the floods that were affecting the area in September with 1,750,000, and lastly the 18.8 million, which were in reaction to the crisis in Tigray, most of which is already being contracted and implemented on the ground. I mentioned indeed that there were tiny steps which have been achieved, which is more than nothing, I would say, compared to where we have been in the past. But indeed, those steps are insufficient to guarantee sufficient assistance inside the Tigray region. What is something I would like to highlight is the common consensus that is being built between donors, with the implementing agencies about what the situation is about and what are the key asks and the key requests we need to put forward to the Ethiopian authorities. And the Commission, all the three services working together have been really trying to get those messages across in a consistent and coherent way. Thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Madam Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would worry that with this kind of presentation about my country, the minutes limited, appreciating the chance, will not give me sufficient time. So I would hope that the August body and Excellency, Honorable Chair, you will tolerate few additional minutes in responding to everyone's question, because all are important for me. I would like to start by the most pertinent one, that is the humanitarian situation and the access. If you might have found my answer very mechanical, I apologize, because I was asked to present in 8 minutes and reading on all the issues. So I would want to reassure you, the European Union Parliament, as our major partners, and access is in principle created through the agreement on November 29 with the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator. As has been mentioned from the Crisis Commission, from Madame Dominic, the speed needs to be expedited, and that has been what has been happening since we've talked on the 19th of January, if you might recall. So, now already the food items and medicines are in Tigray. That would cover 2.5 million needy. And this is just on the ground. And as I've mentioned, in order to expedite, we are using air service to as much as possible, and we're trying to expedite the convoy system. There are problems of transportation, true. There is shortage of trucks, and we're trying to push on that. But I want to assure you that with the speed that has been picked in the past few days, that will be happening. And about expediting the access of the partners, already the Disaster Prevention Commission, their office is open, they are discussing on a daily basis, and they are seeing what they can do in solving that. I would be worried for those that mentioned that, the government would use aid as a weapon. These are our own people, these are our compatriots, and it's a very unfair statement on Ethiopia. This is insulting Ethiopia. So we are very unhappy about it, and that is not true. The second point I would like to mention is about what has been mentioned about my Prime Minister. My Prime Minister, I stated in my statement, if the gentleman has not heard properly, was elected by the then EPRDF on a majority, including the TPLF. So he's not an elected Prime Minister, he is, but he is the government is slating national election for June, as per the initial agreement when the reform started. And let me mention about the humanitarian again on the access situation. I have mentioned this. On the ground, I have to repeat, there are ICRC, UNHCR, World Food Programme, Concern, Médecins Sans Frontières, Save the Children, CRS. Actually, Médecins Sans Frontières has reported from where they were, all the goods and the bads. So we are a developing country. The government has managed a law and order operation campaign in 3 weeks' time, and we are doing as much as we can. But please do not discount the social fabric that Ethiopia has. These are our people, and it should be. So one should be very heartless to say that the government would use this as a weapon. In terms of infrastructure, that is key, by the way. The number is increasing because banks, telephones, and electricity and others were distracted by these negative elements when they were fleeing, as I mentioned. So now, slowly, that is coming. So that will definitely reduce the numbers because salary was not being paid because of the system. There were more people that have become needy. Now, the trading system, the financing system, the salary is coming back, the salary payment is coming back. This will be improving gradually. I want to explain that, the government has not gone for this situation, but there was no other way to prevent it, unfortunately. The TPLF as a vanguard party and the senior leadership should have been very conscious of the act of attacking a national defense force that was protecting the border of Ethiopia. Once the National Defense Force is attacked, how would you be able to protect Eritrean refugees, let alone your own people? This was what the government was trying to do, to restore order in the beginning. And then, we have established an interim government till the election comes. Service is being expedited as much as we can. I'm not saying it's perfect, as much as we can. But the most important thing is the humanitarian situation. We are as concerned as you are. I am very happy it is mentioned, but please don't discount the determination of Ethiopia to help its own people. 60% of the assistance is coming from the government coffers. I want to quickly mention about the regional situation on the Sudan border. That's also an important issue. This by no means will indicate that the situation is being degenerated to a regional issue because of the situation in Ethiopia. This is completely different. How we will see it is that as much as the brotherhood and sisterhood that Ethiopia and Sudan have, and the people are friends, Sudan has been opportunistic to use this opportunity to exploit that Ethiopia was busy with something and has gone inside our territory from 2 to 40 kilometers, depending on where we're speaking. So we are very patient. We are asking the Sudanese side to retreat back to its own area, and then we'll be negotiating. I want to, reassure you that there is a systemic, committee approach to solve this long border problem. It has not happened today. Our borders were not demarcated. So we have committees that are handling them. This can be done easily, can be discussed. And somebody has suggested that we can use the African Union system and other options. Please, we encourage partners to advise the Sudanese to go to the negotiating table and to withdraw from our territory. And we'll be happy to discuss. Communication line is still on. The leaders are speaking, so we hope that this will not degenerate in any way. I'll quickly say something about the Renaissance Dam.
Please, Ambassador, we have to stop now. We're already up
when
to
shall I wrap
7
up?
minutes.
Just give me 2 minutes. I'll leave the Renaissance Dam.
We have to conclude the meeting because we have another point of agenda. Madam Vassal, thank you very much for being with us. I thank you, our guest speaker also. Our committees will follow the situation in Ethiopia, I can promise you, because there is also concern about the position of Christians in your country. Recently we witnessed the mass killing of Christians during the religious ceremony. I was hoping that you will refer also to this situation. If not, we will be appealing for the plenary debate on the situation in Ethiopia and the position of Christians. So once again, thank you very much for being with us. And as I said, our committees will follow the situation in Ethiopia, and most likely we will have pretty soon also a debate in the plenary section on this situation in Ethiopia and the neighboring countries. Thank you very much, colleagues, for this discussion.